Hi everyone, in this tutorial we're going to go over the Move tool. I'll show you how to select images, move them, and arrange them, and I'll also show you how to transform them by scaling, rotating, and skewing them in different ways. Alright, let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to show you is how to get your images into Photoshop, and there's a couple different ways that I do it. First, you can go up to File and click Open. Click on the image you want to open. And then that's going to open your image in a separate composition. To get it over to this one that you want it in, you can just click on it, hold, and drag over to this comp till it highlights and moves over, and then just let it go. Or you could grab the layer you want, drag it to the composition you want it in, and then drop it in the middle. And then that's going to drop another one in. So now we have these two layers with the same image in here. And I'm just going to delete out one of these. I'm not going to do a tutorial on the layers panel for Photoshop because it is pretty similar to Illustrator, and anything we use in it that is different from Illustrator we'll be covering in tutorials. Okay, so just like in Illustrator, you can click on your layers, and then we'll just hit this trash can icon to delete the one we don't want, and hit yes. Okay, so we have our first one in here. Okay, another way to get it in is just to drag and drop it. So I'm going to open up my folder that has my images in it, and then you can just grab it and drag and drop directly into Photoshop. And then just hit enter. Okay, so when you drag and drop it in like that, it's going to drop it in as a smart object. When I just opened it and dragged it over, it's not a smart object. So, like we covered in the earlier tutorial, you're going to want these to be smart objects for when you're scaling them up and down. So I recommend just dragging and dropping it in, because then it already comes in as a smart object, and you don't have to right click on it and then convert it to a smart object. That's how I do it. Alright, I'm just going to drop in a couple more photos, then we'll go into some of the select options. So you can also drag and drop multiple photos at once if you just hold Shift or Control to select them. If you hold Shift, it selects everything. Control lets you select individual ones. Okay, so I'll grab these two photos that I haven't gotten yet, and then drag and drop them both in. I'm going to hit Enter. It'll drop the one in, and then I'll hit enter again, and it'll drop in this one. You'll notice in the top properties here when we have our move tool selected that we have an option here called auto select, and that's checked on. That should be checked on by default, but it might not always be. And it's something that you might not always want on too, so I'll show you why you want it checked on and why you might not want to have it checked on. Just depends on the instance. So with auto select checked on, what that does is let you select it by clicking on it in here and not just in your layer panel. So wherever you click, it's going to automatically select that image. So if I first just select on Frankie here and move it around, it's going to select that one that I'm clicking on. If I click back here, it'll select the tree. And then if I can click back here and select the flower layer way in the back, and it'll move it around. So whichever one you click on, you can select it. So this makes it easier so you don't have to come into your layers every time. You can just click on the one you want to move and move it. But once you start getting into masking, you're going to have transparencies on some of these objects. So you might not see that you're clicking on one layer because it's transparent when you're trying to click on something behind it. So then you're not going to want to have auto select on. So if I turn off auto select, it's just going to select whatever layer I have. So if I want to grab something back here, but I keep accidentally grabbing one of my layers in front, I can just click on it, and then it's going to move that layer around behind it, even though I'm clicking on the ones in front. To select multiple images, if you want to do it in your layer panel, if you want to select multiple layers in a row, you can do it by holding Shift and Select, or to select certain ones, you can hold Control. So Control, and then you can skip certain ones, and then it's just going to grab those layers. With auto select on, if you hold Shift and click, just like in Illustrator, you'll select multiple images. So we can select the back layer here, and select this front one, and then just move those two around. So those are instances where you'll want to have auto select on and where you might not want to have it on. Okay, while we're working in the layers panel, I just wanted to quickly show you how to create a new layer. It's similar to Illustrator. You just come down to the bottom and click the create new layer icon, and that's going to create a new layer. To name it, you just double click on the layer name, and then you can type in a new name there. And to move it around, you just drag and drop it. So right now we have an empty layer here above everything. And I'm just going to delete it by hitting delete when it's selected, or by coming down to the trash can. Okay, I'm just going to go over some of the different ways now to transform your images. One way to do that is up at the top here, you have this option to show transform controls. If you click that, as soon as you click on an image, you're going to get the controls to transform it. So I clicked on this one, and now I have these controls here. So similar to with Illustrator, I can hold off to the side till I get that little curved icon, and I could rotate my image. And I can also grab it so I have these little corner arrows, and I could scale it. And then you just want to hit enter to accept your changes. I'm going to do Control Z to undo that. Now, I don't like having my transform controls on every time I grab a layer, because sometimes I just want to move it around without these extra controls. So I usually just leave that off, and then when I'm ready to transform it, I'll make sure it's selected, and I'll go up to Edit, and I'll do either Free Transform, which gives us these options. So that's the same as just clicking the transform controls. Or you can come to Transform and select either Scale, Rotate, Skew, Distort, Perspective, or Warp. We can also rotate it by certain degrees here, and we could flip it horizontally and vertically. If you want to just do a quick scale or rotate, instead of going to the Transform and doing it in here, that's when you just use the Free Transform or Show Transform Controls. And the Free Transform shortcut is Control or Command on a Mac and T. And that'll just bring this up to quickly scale it down or up and to rotate it. I'll undo that and just hit enter. So I'll just show you some of the different transform options we have. I'm going to turn off the visibility on these layers. Like with Illustrator, it's just the little eyeball icon on the side. Okay, move this over to the middle. We're going to do Edit, Transform. We already know what Scale and Rotate do. Let's try hit Skew. So to skew it, you can just grab any of these points and just drag it in a direction. And it's just going to skew it in different directions. And then you just have to hit enter to accept it. I'll do Control Z to undo that. And let's try another one. Let's try Distort. You can grab the different anchors again, and then it just distorts it. So they all work kind of similarly, but you can get different shapes and sizes with the different options. Hit enter to accept it. I'm going to hit Control Z to undo it. Let's try Perspective. And what that does is change the perspective of the image. Undo that. And finally we have Warp. So what Warp does is give you a mesh, and you could click any of the points on the mesh here, and it warps it in whatever direction you pull it. And you also have these handles here, kind of like with on the paths in Illustrator. I'll just undo that. And we also have our rotates here, so you can just rotate it in different directions. And we also have flip horizontal and flip vertically. All right, I'm just going to undo those. Now, we don't have sublayers like we do in Illustrator, but we have folders we could create to organize our layers in Photoshop. So, say I want to put a couple of these into a folder. I'm going to highlight both of them, and then come down to this icon right here, which is the folder icon. Create that. It's going to create a new group, and it's going to put those into a folder. You can click this little arrow here to expand it, to show what's in the group, and you can double click it to rename the group. So I'm going to turn these two off for now and show you some of the options with the group. Now with auto select on, when we select it, we're only selecting the layer, so it's just selecting this Frankie layer in the group. But you can go up here to this layer option and drop it down to group. So now when you click with the auto select on, it's going to select the entire group, and now we're moving the whole group together. And then if you want, you can turn that off back to layer, and then it just selects the layer in that group. You can also create a group first without selecting things to put in by just creating it and then grabbing your layers and dragging and dropping them in. You want to make sure that you have it highlighted over the entire group. If I hold it up higher, you just get a line above it that's going to drop them above the group. But if you highlight the whole group with them, it's going to drop them into the group. Now, if I want to ungroup them, I can either right click on it, do ungroup layers, and that's going to ungroup them and get rid of the group, or I could click on both of them and just drag them out of the group. Then I can highlight the group and delete it from here, or I could right click on it and just do delete group. Okay, if you want to have your images move together, but you don't want to have them grouped together, you can link them. And I'll show you what I mean by that. I'm just going to scale these down. So I'm going to do a Control-T to bring up my free transform. Hit Enter. Select the other one. Control-T. And like I said in the earlier tutorial with smart objects, if you're going to be scaling them up and down and testing the different sizes you want to try out for your layout, you want to make sure that you have them as smart objects. So now I can scale them back up and I'm not going to lose any of the quality. Okay, so I have all of my images here, but I want to have them all linked as if they were in a group, but without them actually being in a group. So what you can do is select the ones you want to have linked. So say I only want these 3 linked. I'll highlight those together, and I'll come down to this little chain link icon. This is to link your layers. So if I click that, you're going to get the icon on the side here, and that means these layers are linked. So now no matter which one of those you select, it's going to grab all of them together, and it's not grabbing this one because it's not linked with them. If I want to add this one to them, I can highlight all of them again and just hit link, and now they're all linked together. To unlink them, you can highlight and then just hit the unlink button, and now they're unlinked. So that's a way to move them all together without them being in a group. You can also transform multiple images at once by selecting them together. So I'm going to shift select these two, do Control-T to do my free transform, and it's going to let me scale both of them together or rotate them both together. Alright, that's going to cover it for this tutorial.